Well, welcome back to our very last session of the 5th Annual Parent Network Conference. You'll notice that we've added a little bling we got going on. This is, we are so excited to do this, the last session of our workshop, Finding Unicorns and Other Ways to Create Your Own Support System, Engaging Informal and Natural Supports in Mental Health Care. So in honor of that, we are all unicorned up. So so before we get started, a couple housekeeping sessions as thoughts I need to give you. If you have any questions during our session, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. That way it's in the Zoom menu bar, and that will help us manage your questions. Also, we have a poll that we're going to do at the beginning just so we kind of know who we're talking to. It's anonymous, so please contribute. After the session, you're going to see a survey about this session. We would love your feedback because it helps us make these better. And this week, we went live with our latest Parent Network survey. You will get a link emailed to you tomorrow, but you can also join us at idahoparentnetwork.org. It is for parents who live in Idaho. So if that is not you, please feel free to share it. But if it is you, please take it. It helps contribute to the information we're gathering in Idaho on the mental health system of care. And in the coming days, we will be posting the slide deck along with this video, because everyone needs to see me in a unicorn headband for posterity. And we'll also have the resources we talk about available on our website. So with that out of the way, we are going to go ahead. Let's see. We have with us today Angela Lindig, and who she had her little unicorn who was riding across the screen here.
My little unicorn.
And she is executive director at iPoll. Then we have Celeste, and Celeste, it has occurred to me, I have never said your last name.
It's Seibel.
Okay, well, it's Celeste Seibel, and she is with she's a wraparound person for here in Idaho, but she's at Portland State University, and we're excited to have her. A lot of what we're talking about today falls under wraparound principles. And then we have Amy Marie joining us from the Parent Network, and she is rocking her unicorn today. And then you have met me. I am Laura, and I have been here all week. So we are going to turn this over to Celeste and let you go with it. We're going to just have a good conversation about this.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm really excited to be talking about natural support. So thanks for having us in our festive attire. So what we're going to cover is what is a natural support and who are these magical unicorns? How to spot a natural support in the wild, and ways natural supports can help you and your family, and how to build a system of natural supports to meet your family's individualized needs. And we also have a resource to share as well that can help identify natural supports. Next, please.
Okay, hold on. There we go.
So I think a big question that comes up for everyone is, what the heck is a natural support? I think actually systems folks, families, youth, even just everyday people are like, what the heck is a natural support? And it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. And so, I just had my little pop-up there. Thank you. So let's talk about what a natural support is. It's a person who is not paid to be part of your life and provides you with some type of support. Maybe it's a friend, family member, coworker, pastor, community member. It might also be a person who is paid to be in your life, but they're choosing to support you beyond the functions of their role. So maybe it's a teacher, but you catch up and get coffee, or it's the bus driver that knows your child well and can give you updates on how they're doing. Maybe it's a coach or a janitor at the school. And it's important that both parents and youth benefit from having natural support. So we want to build natural supports for both families and youth. And so I'd like to turn it over to the panelists to see if anyone has some examples of what this has looked like for you.
So many, so many. I think one of the reasons that I am dressed as a unicorn today is because for me, Amy is one of my unicorns. She's one of those people I can call. Yay! Celebrate the unicorns. She is someone I can call when I just need more than what I'm getting in every other capacity. And it's important that I have someone. But you know what? Angela is also another one of my unicorns. And it's because sometimes the stories we have to tell are scary. Sometimes our realities don't look like everybody else's, and it is amazing to have someone who I can call and just say gah, and they're not trying to fix it. Neither one of them are going to say, well, have you tried this? They're going to say, oh, that's hard. And I know that they believe that. I'm not going to have that judgment. And so, finding safe people to be your unicorns, because it's never good if your unicorn turns into a rabid dog and bites your ankles. So needing a friendly unicorn is kind of an important part of what we need. I mean, ladies, you might have another
Laura,
thought on that.
So I've said this a million times over the years, and people have heard me say it in presentations and elsewhere. But the thing that I learned is that you said the word safe, and we learned that we needed to surround ourselves with people we trust and people who trust us. And so that we are being that, and those are the unicorns in our lives, the people that have stuck around, that trust us, that know us, and know that what we're experiencing is real, and they will support us even if they don't understand it. Another unicorn of mine actually was elementary school counselor. We pulled my youngest daughter out of school, and I homeschooled her for about 1.5 years, and that school counselor called me on her own just to see how things were going. Are things okay? Do you need to come up? Do you want to do any testing? Do you have access to that? She absolutely had, she didn't understand the whole situation, but she supported our family in ways that she may never know. Just the way she reached out was enough for me to say, I've got somebody I can trust that, supports us. So you just never know where those folks are going to show up either.
And it may not be someone that you've even met in person. I know for me, using social media to find other parents that have similar experiences as us, a lot of my support started there. And don't dismiss that connection that you can have with other people in different parts of the country.
Yeah, I have been part of support groups that were virtual, and that's actually how I first started figuring out that I needed them. I remember, and now I look back and I laugh, because I remember the day that I sat there waffling, was it worth it to spend $5 a month on a membership for a support network full of parents that understood me? And I remember thinking, I don't know, is it worth $5? And I laugh now, because those ladies, they have got me through so many parts of my life. And even though I'm not part of that group anymore, many of us still talk, and we're still on the journey together. And even though they're all over the United States, we find ways to run into each other. Like, we track each other down. I was at a conference one time, and one lived 1.5 hours away, and got in the car, and we drove to see each other just so we could hug, because we had not had a chance to do that yet. I've had some for Thanksgiving dinner, when they didn't have a place to be that day. And, those are the things that, but it's not easy. You can't wake up in the morning and say, today's the day I'm going to go find myself a unicorn. It doesn't really work that way. So I think this leads into that right here.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Amy and Angela, for your wonderful examples of how you've utilized natural supports and where they've come from. So we've been touching on this a little bit already, but why do families need natural supports? Why is this something, especially systems and providers and just people are directing us towards? Why is this important? From a systems perspective, excuse me, systems wants families and youth to have support in place that will be there for them after they transition out of formal services. So who's going to be there after those services are complete? So that's an important piece of the work with systems. Natural supports also provide different types of supports that typically isn't offered in formal services. So some of those things might be hope, friendship, day-to-day tasks. You know, I don't think a provider is going to drive an hour and a half to meet up with Laura to give her a hug. So, you know, these are the things that our natural supports do that make them very special in our lives. And natural supports are typically the people that families and youth call when they need support after hours. So again, who are the people that families and youth are going to call when maybe they have a crisis or maybe they need support and it's 6 p.m. and the offices are closed. So these are the reasons why we need those natural supports. And I'm curious, oh, shall we move ahead? Okay.
Well, I mean, either way, I think it lends into this next slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So then where do natural supports come from? So as we've been talking about with some of the previous examples, they can be friends, coworkers, neighbors, people from your church, the gym, the grocery store, you know, a national parent network membership where we can find those people. People who interact with you or your child who might have helpful insight. So again, as we've been talking about, who are those people that know you or know your child that can provide that additional help or support? As Angela was saying with the counselor at her school, this was really helpful. This person knew her child and had resources that were available. People that you trust to share a bit of your story with and that you think might be able to, that you might be able to count on. So again, who are these people that we are trust enough to be vulnerable and share a little bit of ourselves with? So
well, I think other than unicorns, we need to discuss the elephant that is in the room. And that would be the fact that we've burned a lot of bridges. And raising kids like we have is intense. And I mean, I got kicked out of my very first parent, like, you know, mommy and me play group because they were scared of our story. I mean, they would hear some of the things I was talking about, and, you know, when, you know, you've got 6-month-old or 9-month-old and you see them start like gathering their kids together and scooting them to the other side of the playground because they're afraid that whatever we have might be catching. You know, I burned a lot of bridges. And I think when you're going through crisis, especially mental health crisis, and I don't know, maybe everyone else is on their best day during a mental health crisis, but I'm a basket case. I mean, my unicorn horn is whoop and I am down. And that's kind of messy. And a lot of people don't want to be there in the mess, or you're afraid they don't want to be there in the mess and you don't want to burn that relationship. And I even have had my kids tell me, you know, hey, mom, don't call so-and-so because I don't want to ruin that relationship with this information. And so, you know, I think when you talk about what a unicorn is, we also have to talk about what it isn't. And for me, the amount of bridges I've burned, it sits on me. I mean, there are people that I wish I could still have a good relationship with that aren't, I mean, it's not their fault. My story is big and scary, and the stuff it happens in our lives is intense sometimes. But that doesn't mean I don't need someone who's standing there with it. And not everyone who is a unicorn in my life has a kid with mental health concerns. Some of them are people who just have big hearts and are willing to stand in the mess with me. And I've actually had the most luck with bus drivers. I don't know why, but I've had so many in my kids' lives who, you know, are the ones who show up when my kid needs, like, my kid had an event and he invited the bus driver. And I was like, oh, buddy, that's not really his thing. But the only person who showed up except for our family for my son was the bus driver. And, you know, snotty crying at the event because the bus driver is there was not going to be effective. So I just put a pin in that till later, but I did see how important it was, you know.
I think for me, I had to really look at how to find a natural support for the first time when I moved to a new area. my whole adult life. I had been in the same area. I had natural supports. I didn't even really consider the idea of how do you find a natural support until I was somewhere new. And before I left my area, I spoke with my closest friends, and they kind of gave me a pep talk. They're like, okay, Amy, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get to your new area, and you need to reach out to these certain people and just be upfront with them. Just tell them, hey, this is my family. These are the issues that we're dealing with. You know, we're going to need some support. And I got the courage to do that. And when I reached out to those people, I was turned away. And so my first natural support that I found here was at an iPole training. And it was my neighbor, and she was another special needs mom, and she saw me breaking down, and she quickly became a resource for my family. And then that rolled into meeting other special needs moms. And so for the first time in my life, the majority of my natural supports are other families like Laura's and like mine. And I have relied on them heavily. And it's not even asking them to do something for me. It's having someone actually understand what it is to have a child with mental illness and to deal with crisis after crisis after crisis, you know, that involves law enforcement or, you know, other things that are big and scary that the majority of the world doesn't deal with. And so it's scary to reach out to complete strangers to try to build relationships.
I want to go back real fast on that other slide where why do we need, you know, when formal supports end that. So yeah, not all of us actually had access or have access to good formal supports. So my youngest had pretty significant mental health concerns, and we had a very disjointed system of care for her in that she was never Medicaid eligible. She was never eligible to receive certain services that, you know, come through that system. And so we had to have natural supports. There was no other way around it. I mean, I'm being her therapist and her teacher and her parole officer and all of these, I'm wearing all these hats. We as a family and we had to build in natural supports to make this work for her so that she could have a healthy adulthood without those formal supports that were never in place for us. And many, many families are in that situation if they aren't eligible for services despite their child's diagnosis.
Well, I think it's also important to realize that we're not just talking about natural supports for the child with the diagnosis or the parent. It's also all of the siblings. Now, in our case, every one of our children have mental health concerns. And so, yes, granted, they at several times in our lives, all of them were in services, but as they exit services, they still need those natural supports built in, you know, on how, you know, having a family with the dynamics that we do is very difficult. And so it's important to be also thinking about everyone in the family needs natural supports, not just the child with the diagnosis and not just the parents.
And I think one of the things that natural supports do better, probably because of our social connection, I mean, you guys can disagree with me, but I think we do silly better together. I mean, Amy and I are sitting here with unicorn horns. I don't know that many providers who would just whip out a unicorn horn for me, though if I suggested, I have some of them who definitely would, but you know, I think that camaraderie, being able to laugh at the silly stuff that doesn't necessarily feel silly to someone else, like when your kid has been refusing to bathe for months and then, you know, they accidentally get caught in the sprinklers and we're like, victory, you know, I mean, those things are funny, and being able to laugh at those in a way that, you know, people aren't laughing at you, but laughing with you. And I mean, I can tell you right now, when my kids see this, they're going to face palm. They're going to be like, oh, Mom, no. And I'm going to laugh because I'm like, I wasn't the only one doing it. And then I'm going to get the, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? That speech. And I would say, with Amy, solidarity, sister. Because we are sparkly unicorns. I mean, so I think that's something that we contribute that, you know, you don't get in the same way. We look different when we show up to community events. I've often said that getting my family out the door takes more coordination and effort than invading a small country.
I think that brings us back to the sibling issues too. As Amy mentioned, you know, you've got multiple kids in your home, as do I. And yes, and my oldest has a significant developmental disability. My youngest has a mental health diagnosis. Our son was the experiment in between. You know, we were truly a circus going in public. My husband used to say, we're perfectly fine at home. We go out in public and it's like, here they come. So, but yes, you definitely, I mean, having those friends, supports, peers, whoever it might be, that really kind of can look at you and your family and say, yeah, we're a circus, it's all good. We're the same. We get together and it's like you can breathe that sigh of relief that you know you're not being judged, you know that your family, everybody's just appreciated for who they are. And this is our lives, right?
So something on this slide that really speaks to me is natural supports can help in big and small ways. So I think that when someone says, who's your natural supports, your tendency is to go to that, you know, who can like do everything for me? Who's that person? Who's the mom or the grandma figure in our family that can step in and take care of us? And the reality is that those don't really exist. Those are more rare than unicorns. So, but who can I call and say, oh, I'm really struggling? Or who do I see at the mailbox who is the neighbor who doesn't look at me with crazy eyes? You know, who's the one that goes, hey, good to see you, and they meant that. I mean, some days that's the most positive interaction I feel like I've had. Or who's the, you know, the administrator or the secretary, staff member at the school who looks truly thrilled to see me walk in the door as opposed to, oh, here we go. You know, who is the person at the grocery store when I cannot find that thing and I've got 3 crises happening simultaneously, who goes, hey, you look like you need help. I mean, I am not going to call the lady from the grocery store probably and ask her to come do my dishes. But when I see her at the grocery store, she asks how my kids are doing. And there are days, I'm not going to lie, if she's listening to this, she's going to laugh. But there are times I go grocery shopping when I know she's working. Because, you know, that is like personal time in the bread aisle. And, you know, that's one of my natural supports. So I think that the misconception that natural supports need to be someone who has a seat at the Thanksgiving dinner table is, you know, assuming you can get your kids to sit down at a Thanksgiving dinner table and that the turkey isn't getting thrown. But, you know, that's for me. I mean, Celeste, I know you're really good at this. This is what you do. You help families find this. So tell me, how do you find them?
Well, I think that you are raising a really good point. And as we think about what natural supports do, as you all have been pointing out, it's it's emotional support, it's friendship, there's problem solving, advice or information, referrals, just people who've walked in your shoes, as you all have been pointing out, that maybe have some really helpful insights or connections, or maybe it's those everyday favors and help. It just can look like a lot of different ways. And I love your example, Laura, of just even someone at the grocery store that you enjoy seeing, that you kind of maybe know their schedule a little bit, or you're excited to see them when they're in that the checkout line, just so you can say hello for a few minutes and fill your cup a little bit. So it can look very different. And I think your point as well, when we think about like child and family teams or wraparound teams or IEP teams, individualized education planning teams. I always try to say the acronyms if I catch myself doing it. So sometimes those can be people that you really want to be part of your team, but then other times it can just be someone that's helping out in like we're saying, big or small ways. So here are some examples, and I know we've thrown out a few already, but maybe there is a one-time ask like watering your plants when you're out of town. Maybe it's a reoccurring ask like someone that drops your toddler off at daycare so you can take your other child to therapy appointments like every Tuesday. So that's something that you're planning around, and you can count on that person to help you out with transportation. Or maybe it's a if this happens ask, like if a crisis happens, can they babysit your toddler so you can take your other child to the hospital in the middle of the night. So you have a bit of a backup plan, you know who you can call in that moment when you need that immediate help. And so here's just some examples of those big and small ways that natural supports can provide support. And I'm just curious from the other panelists that how you've maybe navigated these types of experiences and what that's looked like for you.
I know for me, I've noticed that now that I have teenagers and they have a lot more say in who is involved in our family crises and when they need help. I noticed that when I'm filling out emergency forms, I know, I have my standard myself, my husband, I have my mom. She's always my go-to emergency person, even though she's not even in the state, because she knows exactly what to do in an emergency situation because she's lived with us. But for my 3 teenagers and specifically, they have their own emergency person. The school knows that if my daughter needs a safe place to go, this is who she goes to. And this person, which happens to be one of her youth leaders, is allowed to pick her up from school. That person is not the same person for my other 2 teenagers. And so starting to recognize that our children themselves need specific people. But it is hard. I think you kind of have to, it's a learning game. Yeah, not a game, but you just have to, I think it's so important to figure out who you can trust. Just like Angela was saying, she said it earlier this week, and that really hit me. It's not just who I can trust, but that they trust me. I need to know that they trust me as a parent, that they're not second guessing. They're not saying that I'm the crazy one that needs to be, taken care of or whatever. They're going to trust my judgment, and when I ask them to follow these guidelines with my child, that they're willing to do it. So there'll be times where you will think that someone is trustworthy or that they would be a good fit for your family, and then you realize that they're not, and that's okay. And that's where you got to readjust. Doesn't necessarily mean that the bridge is burned, but they play a different role in your family's life. And then also I think about my other kiddos, maybe there's another slide about this, but maybe there's someone that's calling and they can't watch a kid, but they can bring my daughter to dance, or they can help somebody with homework. I mean, there's so many things, and we need to be thinking, have a list in our minds of what the needs are and what they can do to help.
So I think for me, when we talk about, as Amy said, what can I do, and we engage, for me, the biggest thing is saying yes. When someone says, hey, can I? We had a time where I had one kiddo in a mental hospital and a psychiatric facility. And I had another kiddo that really needed some attention. And, it's not possible, unicorn or not, to be in, multiple places at one time. And this person called me out of the blue and said, how do you feel about me taking your kiddo to a 3D Smurf movie? And I'm thinking, of all the things that are on my mind today, a 3D Smurf movie wasn't even on the top 100 list. And so she picked up my kiddo, took her to a movie. And throughout the day, I started getting pictures of them hanging out in their 3D glasses and, sharing popcorn and doing that stuff. And as much as it was really fabulous that my kiddo had something fun to do for her that wasn't focused on what was happening in our family, for me, the biggest gift there was the pictures of seeing my kiddo so happy in the middle of something that I could not do for her. And I think I value the pictures from those texts probably more than any of the other part of that service for me. But it was a weird thing to say yes to. This lady was grandma age, why is she wanting to hang out with my kids? Like, but that is possibly one of, I have a long list, but it hits my most touching, moments.
I think for me, I really appreciate when someone can give my child a normal, typical outing that our family doesn't get to enjoy because of the dynamics. And for us, you talk about a 3-ring circus. We have 7 kiddos, and it's very difficult for all of us to go out into public. And my youngest, who is the most tenderhearted and sweetest and doesn't need services at all, luckily she has a best friend who her mom includes her in everything. She gets to go to the zoo during the summertime. She gets to go on these different outings that she doesn't get to participate in a family setting because it just, let's just say it doesn't go well. So she's not missing out on those things. And I really appreciate that, because she is getting those experiences that I can't give her on a regular basis.
I think it's important to allow ourselves to lean into some of those experiences for our kids as well. I think you reminded me, there was this is so funny. There was a janitor in was it middle school or high school for my son? I can't remember if it was middle school or high school. Who was retired. He was retired. He was he had a beautiful former career before he took on this janitorial position at the high school, and he just massive amounts of travel and experience, and he somehow managed to make a connection with my son and began inviting him over on the weekends to play chess with another group of senior citizen men. So I've got this 15-year-old kid who's going over to Mr. So-and-so's house playing chess, but it gave him that, that in itself isn't really normal, but it gave him those activities that he could do outside of the environment, the chaos that was happening in our home, and also a little bit of pride that that he's liked enough by these adults and respected as for the bright kid that he was, to go over and play chess with them. So we do need to allow. At first I was as a mom, I'm like, that's weird. Is that weird? Okay, maybe that's not, so, but to trust and to lean into some of those experiences, to give our kids those opportunities to go and do those things with other people, and not be worried about that. Just let them have those experiences.
Awesome. Thank you for such great examples. And I think what I love about the conversation that's emerging is just that, also when to say yes to opportunities that show up, and just to kind of go with it. And we're hearing that can be really helpful too. Another strategy might be to think about the types of support you need. So maybe you're needing some more emotional support, advice, information, a favor, whatever it might be. And then if it feels appropriate, if there's someone in your community or your world that you think maybe might be able to help, or you might consider them a natural support, tell them a little bit about your family's story and why you might need some help. And I think this is an important one in the peer world with peer support. We talk about strategic disclosure. So I know families and youth who are multi-systems involved have really, like Laura was saying, sometimes really big stories. And so we might want to think about how much do we want to share with this person right now? And then maybe over time we share a bit more as we get to know them. I think Amy was pointing out that, we might think that one person is a good fit, and then maybe we need to pivot a little bit and think about how they can support in a different way, or whatever that might look like. But I think I love what Brene Brown says about our stories, that our stories are our legacy, and that it's a privilege to share our story with people. So I just like to reiterate that when we feel called to share our story, it's a beautiful thing and it's a gift. And so if you want to tell them a little bit about what's going on for you, then that's a really nice way to let them understand what's happening for you. Ask for the support you need, and make sure to give them the opportunity opportunity to say yes or no to the request. I think this is important because, again, they get to make a decision around if they can do it or not. And if they say yes, then you can start to iron out the plan or the logistics of the request. So again, just trying to think through what are those things that we need support with, who maybe can help, and what is the ask? How do I need support? What does that look like? Awesome. Any thoughts about that previous slide? Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything from the panelists. You all are really the experts with the lived experience. I just talk about what I know from the field.
I would say my only suggestion is that sometimes the people around us can see what we need before we do. And it takes a little humility to sometimes to accept that. I had a day where I just couldn't. I had hit that wall. I was not moving any farther, and I literally just sat down. And there were some health challenges happening in our home at the time, and I was on a wheelie cart because I couldn't stand up. I had no weight bearing on my foot. And I looked into the kitchen, and it felt like every dish I had ever owned was stacked up dirty. And someone was bringing us dinner, which I mean, I think I had mentally filed for, I'm good. I don't, we won't starve today. And I had checked out. And when they showed up, it was a friend of mine and her teenage daughter. And they walked into the kitchen to set the food down and kind of looked around, and without saying a word, one started preparing the meal, like putting all the parts together that they had brought. And the other one started doing my dishes. And as I'm sitting there watching people do my dishes, there was part of me thinking, this is possibly the most embarrassing moment of my life. And there was another part of me that was like, dang, Skippy, I'm going to have a clean bowl. I mean, like, I finally decided that this person was safe enough with me and vice versa, that I could let her do my dishes. And I think if I had to, it's going to rank in one of the top 3 personal kinds of service I was ever offered from a natural support. And I still think about that. And, so not that I'm offering my services to show up and wash other people's dishes, but I want you to know that if I show up in your house and that's what you need, it's not I understand how hard it is to accept, but I would totally roll up my sleeves and do your dishes for you. Do not want to start fielding dishes requests.
I think for me, in regards to this slide, what happens when I feel shame or guilt, this is a big one. It is really hard to ask for help. And especially when you are not in a season in your life where you can offer the same help that you are requesting. And it takes a lot of inner work on your part or on my part to be able to say, it's okay, it's not my season in life to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And remember, one of our earlier sessions was talking about our values. And one of the values that I hold very dear to my heart is service and helping people. And in the times of my life when I haven't been able to do that, the capacity that I love doing, really affected my own mental health. And having to give myself those pep talks. It's okay to ask for help. And think about how you feel when you help someone, and how, I love helping people to a fault. And being able to tell yourself it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do it all on your own. And one way, how do I deal with the shame and the guilt? I find other ways that I can serve. I tell myself, okay, I may not be able to do this, but this is a way that I can help somebody else out. And I try my best to make it worthwhile for people who help me, especially those big asks. And, when I go out of town for a conference or for the things that I've been able to be involved in, it takes an army of people to take care of my 7 kiddos. And I like to give them cards, or I'll pick up flowers, or, find a way to show appreciation for the people that are helping you. And it makes it a little bit easier.
Thank you, Amy. That's so helpful. And I think you're absolutely right. As we know that there's a lot of should feelings. I should be able to manage this on my own, or I shouldn't have to ask for help, or what if I can't return that favor? And I know that we maybe have well-intentioned friends or relatives, and they maybe say things like, well, when I was raising my kids, I did blah, 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 or, oh, that's nothing for me. One time my kid jumped off the roof or whatever. And again, I think sometimes it's a effort to try to relate to the situation, but it sometimes doesn't feel as validating or supportive. And it's okay if your experience is different from another parent's. And it's also okay to ask for help. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because it comes up a lot when we're thinking about the support we need.
You may also have, I have a very good friend who these ladies both know, who used to work here with me, and we had our own very similar situations. And we actually played a game of one-up each other. So one of us would say, well, my kid did this, and then the other one would say, oh yeah, mine did this. But that was our way of coping with each other. It was a one-up game on purpose. It wasn't, it wasn't that trying to relate. It was just, that was how we could laugh about it.
I've played that game too, Angela. It's an amazing game to play. It's like so cathartic to be like, oh no, this happened at my house.
As long as we're all on the same page of playing the game. If we're not, that's no good. I wanted to say one more thing on that other slide though. Well-meaning family members or not, who say those things about, my kids, whatever. One of the things that I have heard over and over and over and over for the last many years, well, all kids do that. Well, all kids do those things. And I've spent a lifetime, a generation now, of trying to explain, yes, all kids may do all of these things. All kids don't do all of these things all the time. And forever, and it's exhausting. And
at the same time.
Exactly. So we are constantly trying to educate the people around us, and that even includes some of the providers around our child's specific needs and what we need as a family to be supported. So when we say these things like all kids do these things, you're diminishing what I need. And then you can get into shame and guilt around asking for any help, because obviously I should be better at all of this, right? And my kid is maybe fine, and maybe it is me. You start to second guess yourself as a parent. I second guessed myself many times before things rose to the level of crisis, and then it's like, okay, that's right. I'm not crazy here. This is absolutely real. So it does make it challenging to ask for help.
Well, I think it's easier to know that you aren't crazy when you start to meet other families that are dealing with that. We did have a question come in from a provider. As a provider and advocate, how can I help parents find those natural supports when they often find you? That's a good question. I think sitting down when you talk with the families and just have them kind of go through a list of people. It's hard. It's hard, ask them about, okay, well, do your neighbors, or do you have any coaches, or just kind of start going through that list, and you may help them think of someone that they hadn't thought of before as a natural support.
We do have a little activity, I think, if we have time, that we'll show at the end, but I think it's looking at where you already are. I mean, many of us as parents, we do not have time to join a social club so that we can find more natural supports, nor does it feel very authentic to join a club and be like, hey, I'm here so you guys can support me. I mean, it doesn't feel great. Though I have moved and come into new communities at church where I'm going to be already. And when I introduced myself this last time we moved, I actually introduced myself and said, I just need you guys to know I need a friend. I'm one of those people who desperately needs friends, and I need them sooner versus later. So if I don't scare you too badly, introduce yourself and we'll be BFFs. Let's do a movie. And, everyone was like, oh, but I'm like, I don't have time to play around waiting for this to work organically. So I'm just going to be real honest. I need people. Would you like to be my people? Because if so, And you know what? The next week, a lady who I would never have thought to seek out showed up at my house because I said I wanted to learn how to can. And she's like, this is what you buy and I'll come to your house and teach you. And I sat and learned how to can that day. She's an amazing woman who has followed our family to make sure we're okay. And it was because I literally said, I need a friend. I'm not picky. Please be my friend.
I want to say too that, you know, I'm finding, just because of my work, that we're a little unique in Idaho in that we have these support groups through Facebook, closed Facebook groups that are all over the state. And some people are subscribed to all of them, and they're not all, you know, they're cross disability. They're not necessarily mental health specific. But if you've got a support group online that's in your community, that you know there are people that live in your community, you may find at least those social supports through that. And right now, in the land of COVID, when everything's virtual, now's the time to maybe kind of peruse through those. You can search, you know, if anybody wants to know what some of those support groups are, I think that we actually have those on our website. But I find there is a lot of support that you can get and then take offline. You'll meet like-minded people there and make real valid connections that can be then show up at your house and teach you how to knit. You know,
that's on my list. So yeah. Angela, if you want to teach me how to knit,
I don't know how to knit. I don't know how to knit or sew. I'm not your person.
You're my unicorn for other things.
We have a comment, and this person said that, remember when you ask to accept help, you give a gift to the helper. The gift goes both ways. And I think I kind of touched on that earlier. You just remember how it feels to help somebody else. And if someone is willing to put themselves out there and say, what can I do to help? Accept it as genuine, because if they weren't willing, they most likely wouldn't say it. So
one more thing to add to that for social media. Those of you who know, I am very much an open book, and
yes.
my Facebook page is a cross between just my family, my personal life, and my professional work. I'm not one of those that post politics or memes or anything else. It's just authentically me. And that has given me an outlet of which to both share my story, receive help, and then also I find that when I share, it touches so many other people that are going through something similar. A year ago, my family was in crisis, and I shared it publicly and respectfully, but I shared it publicly. And I had a lot of people reach out behind the scenes to tell me how much that meant to them, because they were experiencing something similar, and they felt that they felt validated and helped. So I might have been an unintentional unicorn for them, but by them giving me that feedback, it helped me, it supported me in knowing that I shared appropriately and that I had some peace in that, and I could move forward.
Well, unicorns are magical, Angela, so it's okay. They're unintentional.
There you go.
I know that we need to move on, but I wanted to say it's okay to renegotiate your ask with your natural supports. So what someone can do for you today, they may not be able to do every day. And what you need today may look different than what you need tomorrow. So just because you only ask, can you pick them up from ballet? You know what? We're not doing ballet lessons anymore, but I could really help it when you go to the park with your kid. Could you let mine tag along? You know, those are really great ways to just, and if they say no, I mean, you don't, you know, they didn't say, I hate you. They said, I can't do that today. This is what I want Celeste to talk about, because in wraparound and in child and family teams, we're always asked to bring natural supports, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but it's kind of like when you need to go shopping for the dress for the perfect function. You are never going to find the dress that fits the day you need to go to the function, nor are you going to find the funny card in the store the day you have a birthday you send it to. It's kind of takes a little prep work. And we have a comment that comes in, it says, it's really easy to feel alone. And like, you know, if you don't have a natural support, and the more alone you feel, I think the more we tend to self-isolate and then not go look for more. So as part of the wraparound process and child and family teaming, here you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to think about how to build those natural supports, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming, especially if we've maybe burnt bridges in the past, or we're in a new community like Amy was describing, where you really don't know anyone. Like, how do you start to build those natural supports? So what I would recommend is to try to dedicate some time to think about what your support needs are when you're not actively navigating a crisis. Now, before you get mad at me, I know that parents working with youth who have high level needs, there is likely a crisis happening all the time. So maybe there may not be like a crisis free time, but maybe when things are not a 10 and maybe more like a 3, and you can sit and think a little bit about what it is you might need. I realize with the types of needs that our youth are facing, that there's oftentimes lots of crises. So don't get mad at me. I understand you're navigating a lot, but what I'm trying to suggest here is trying to find a time when you're not like a 10 and things are crumbling, or just everything is really frantic and you're not knowing what to do in that moment. That's where that pre-planning can be really helpful. So think about, who are the people that you know? What do you need help with, and what would support you and your family? So like Laura was saying, sometimes it's just helpful if a friend or a neighbor could take your kids to the park if they're already going. Like that's something that you can make that request or that ask for. So it's helpful to know when you're not activated or you're not in the midst of a giant crisis, to try to think about, what is it that I maybe need? So that's kind of the first recommendation. Let's move to the next slide. So then also, as we're thinking about the types of natural supports we need, what are the different contexts of your life? So we also maybe need different supports at home, when we're in the community, in our children's school. There might be different aspects of that support. And again, we're looking back and thinking about, is the support emotional support and friendship? Is it problem solving? Is it everyday help and favors? Thinking through those different contexts. And then to build those connections and supports that will meet your family's individualized needs. And like we've been noticing, sometimes they naturally come to us, and other times we have to do a little bit of that work, like with Laura's example of just saying like, hey, I'm looking for a friend. Like if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to catch a movie. Like sometimes it's they naturally come to us, and sometimes we have to put a little bit of that work in as well. Thoughts from the panelists, just as we're thinking about building those natural supports and what that can look like?
One of the thoughts that I had, and it probably goes back to the guilt and shame, is when I'm thinking about this, if I can put it in a context of, you know, if I don't want to feel like I'm doing this just for me, if I'm thinking, okay, this is what's best for my family, this is what's best for my child, but I was thinking about that, these are skills that we are demonstrating for our kids. You know, we have these services in place for our kids. We're telling them it's okay to ask for help. It's okay if you need someone to help you. We need to be saying those things to ourselves as parents, and normalize the situation of, you know, it does take a village to raise a child. Yes, ultimately it's my responsibility, but it's okay to reach out and remind yourself that as you remind your kiddos. So when you're giving your kiddos those pep talks, it's like, it's okay that you need a little extra help. You need to be saying that to yourself and internalize it.
Oh, Laura, you're muted.
I unshared everything and I unmuted everything. So this is what happens when I try and multitask. Hold on. But we had a parent who just told us that one of the things that they are worried about is that when they do this, they would clean the house before someone came over to help them clean the house, because they're so worried about being judged.
Yep. And that's where I've been in that. I remember when I used to have someone come and clean my house, and I would clean it. But I totally get that anxiety part. Well, I don't want to expose anyone to my family because I don't know how they're going to handle it and if they're going to gossip. And it really is baby steps, and being able to identify right away, that person's not the right fit for my family, and that's okay. And being able to let go of that. And it's okay if the people that are reaching out, if you're not comfortable with it, it's okay to set that boundary. You know, find something that they can do to help that isn't going to expose them to the nitty gritty and, you know, put them in over their heads. That would be something I would suggest. And it's okay to tell people, yeah, I don't need you stopping by. You're triggering one of my children. Please stop. You know, and be able to identify, yeah, I appreciate that, you know, and recognize that the intent behind it is sincere and genuine. But if it still isn't a good fit for your family, it's okay to set that boundary.
Thanks, Amy. That's a really good point. Laura, I don't know if we're gonna have time to pull back up the, oh, great, Laura's pulling back up the screen.
It decided it was going to have a mind of its own. So there we go.
Perfect. I'll just take a couple minutes to just walk us through. This is a tool that one of my colleagues created at Portland State University, and she validated it in her research. So for any of you research heads out there like me, it's kind of neat when a tool is validated. But this tool is very simple, but I've worked with parents as well as youth working through with this tool, and it can be really helpful. And what it's prompting us to do is think about who are the people that have been supportive to me in the last year in these different contexts of my life. And then thinking about maybe using a different color ink or pen, who are the people that have helped me, but maybe we're not in contact with. Maybe those are some of those people that we've burnt some bridges with, or maybe we've moved away, but in our previous community, they were very helpful. And then lastly, you can think about, like, who are the people that I turn to once a month, like, or regularly? Like, who are the people, maybe like it's people in your book club or whatever it might be that you're talking to more regularly. And then you can then move to this, take those names and see how they fit in to these different types of support we need. How often do we need that support? How close are they? Like, how long have I known this person? So this is another way that we can start to really think about who are the people we know, and it can also help to identify gaps and maybe places where we want to build additional support or leverage these connections in a different way. So I know that this tool is going to be made available, and so please use it and see if it's helpful for you. I think this gets back to one of the questions around, like, how do I develop natural supports if no one is just naturally kind of showing up?
Well, and it would be great for advocates and providers to use these tools and offer it to their clients, you know, when they're brainstorming.
Well, I am really excited that we got to have this conversation. It's a big one. It's probably one of the biggest ones that we have parents say, you know, I don't have anybody. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes we just don't know who the anybodies are that are running around in our lives. So I am grateful for everyone here. The three ladies that are here with me have all listened to my story, probably more than they wanted to hear it, but they have all listened quite graciously and wonderfully. And I think this was the perfect way to end our workshop this year. And I look forward to the feedback we get from our participants, and so that we can kind of see what we've got going for next year, what we can do to teach you more about these things. Thank you. And we just got a question, will the charts be available on the YES website? No, but they will be on the Parent Network website later. So thank you guys for all joining, and thank you for all my fellow unicorns that joined me today. Yay! And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And we look forward to seeing you out there in social media land in the future. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.